Welcome to No Bucks Given, the equestrian podcast where we have honest conversations about the horse industry. Whether it's breaking down the science behind common myths and debunking them, or tackling a hard social topic about the horse industry, we get to the bottom of what matters most, how to best advocate and care for our horses, who we love so much. Today, I'm joined by our most loved guest of the podcast and a dear friend and my trainer, MELISSA GALLAGHER. MELISSA is an equine emotion specialist as well as a classical dressage rider with X numbers of years of experience.
I was like, what? What are we asking numbers on?
I was like, do you not want me to age you?
I don't know. How long have I been doing this? 38 years?
Wow.
39? Yeah.
Yeah. You don't look old enough for that.
Thanks. Yeah. You're the best.
And we have a topic we are super excited to talk about, which is gadgets we don't buck with. I think it's going to be a good one.
Yes.
We're going to discuss both sides of this. We're going to discuss for my end, we're going to discuss the physiological things that happen when we use gadgets that are not for our horse's benefits and are taking a shortcut. And MELISSA is going to speak to the negative effects of the training and emotion on the animals when they're subjected to these. This is such a beefy topic that we really want to dissect. So we're mostly going to focus this episode on riding and lunging aids that force the head and neck into a certain position. We are going to talk and touch on briefly bits and spurs, but we're going to mostly save those for the next episode.
Great.
So, MELISSA, I'd love to just hear a little bit of before we dive in, I'd love to hear a little bit of your history when using different gadgets when it comes to training horses. Are there some you like, some you don't like? Are there any that are a hard stop for you?
Sure. Yeah. Interesting. So I've been doing this, as we just said, for a really long time. So in the 80s, it was like everything was on the table. More of an old school mentality. To get the job done, the horse needs to submit, and the horse needs to do these things. It needs to put its head down, and so you'll use whatever means necessary, basically.
That's an interesting word, submit. And that's changed for you.
It's
over
changed,
the years,
yes, very much so. And
yeah.
I was kind of following what I was taught, and I was lucky to be at a wonderful riding school that we weren't at a show barn. We weren't, focused on that alone. It was a lot of learning how to ride correctly. So I was very lucky in that way. I didn't really discover what we would call gadgets until a little bit later. So my base was really good. Other than maybe grazing reins for ponies and things like that. But I actually think I just got pulled off a lot instead of having a grazing rein, to be honest.
Yeah, I did too.
I just got pulled over the front a bunch.
I remember riding in pony club and seeing other kids had grazing reins, and I was like, "You can do that!"
Right, I love that. And then to find out you can just do it with baling twine, come on! We don't even have to spend any money on it.
And you're like, "Does my trainer not like me?"
Exactly. And then I was like, "Oh, she's really teaching me to sit down." Okay, fine.
And you're like, "I was 80 pounds at the time."
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I fell off 3 times in one trail ride this way. Also, my trainer, I think by the end of it, Robin Brookman, I love you, but she was just like, "Are you on the ground again?" I was like, "Sorry."
That's so cute.
Like, get back on. So then, but by the time I got into later in high school and in college, and I was really into eventing and show jumping, it was a lot of draw reins, big bits, and a lunging system.
Yeah. A lunging pulley system.
Pulley system.
That may or may not ride with Miss Soa system.
And I actually had I had more than one horse flip over.
Wow.
And yeah.
In that specific, that system.
In that system.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And so I was like, huh. Now, I was young also, but in watching how these things worked and the draw reins were very common. I mean, we all rode in draw reins.
Well, yeah, the thing about draw reins is it's not just that it achieves the effect that you want with the horse of creating that nice round frame, but honestly, when I was at one point when I was working for someone, they had me use them, and after when you've ridden like 3 or 4 horses in a day and you're going to get on a really strong horse, like those draw reins are a breath of fresh air. It's it makes your life a lot easier.
Yes, it does. And I had a trainer in my early 20s, and she wouldn't let me use them. And I had just come from a barn where I used them like basically on every horse.
And was that when you were a show jumper?
I was a show jumper,
okay.
Yeah. And not a great one, by the way. I was never a professional show jumper. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
But then I went to this other trainer, and she was like, no. And she was actually the one that told me my favorite line that I still use all these years later, that there should be one pair in the world and everyone should have to share them.
I love that.
And I used to think, like, why? Like, everybody uses them.
Well, and also just a little bit like,
come on. Like, I've been using them for years. What's wrong? And so, but now I go, oh my gosh, like, I say the same line, and I've now been saying it forever. But it did take me a while to understand what she was really talking about.
Right.
And then as I got more and more into dressage and natural horsemanship, really, I think, is what made me go like, wait a minute. And the natural horsemanship I really started when I was maybe in my mid-20s, and then got seriously into it in my late 20s. And that made me sort of realize I wanted to go completely to the other end and go way more holistic in my approach to training. And and I'm not saying that there's not a place ever for draw reins or side reins or, that's pretty much it. No, I mean the running martingale, which we'll talk about later.
The running martingale.
But what I can tell you is in my barn, I only have my rope halters and a singular pair of side reins.
Right. And I'm guessing they're pretty dusty.
And they're pretty dusty. Yeah.
I actually think I might have even seen your side reins. Right. I think you were cleaning out a locker for me and you pulled out this ancient piece of leather and I was like, what are those?
What is that? And so, and it's been, and I'm not saying either, like, there's been some horses, like Kate's old horse, where she would go, just use the draw reins. Like, it'll make your life so much easier. and I'm like, you're not wrong.
Yeah, no, it does make your life easier.
Right, but I was so determined to fix Jag.
Right.
Like, really, and because you've ridden him.
Yeah.
And he was very upside down and a mental wonder when we got him,
Right.
So it was a whole journey. But he actually was like the horse that I'll talk about the most, about being like, I'm so glad I didn't cave and do the draw reins, because he really learned how to come up through the thoracic sling and use himself and carry himself and his own core and everything, which I think with draw reins, you just miss so much of that. And it creates an unnatural frame, and it puts the horse behind the vertical and doesn't get them to use their hind leg. And so I just started using less and less equipment as I went down the line. So
it wasn't some big revelation you had. You just kind of figured out a better way and then phased out of your life.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It really does seem like, I kind of feel like as we were talking and planning this episode, it seemed like really the theme of this episode is that in the right hand, which is maybe 0.01% of the equestrian population, some of these gadgets are okay. But it does seem like 99.9% of the time they're being used to take a shortcut that should not be taken for a correct and comfortable end result for the horse. And I think for me, the physical effects of them are just so devastating. And mental. Yeah. I see like so many horses who have been ridden in draw reins or side reins, and which are used incorrectly to them, and they're just so they're so muscle sore all through their neck. A lot of those horses have either diagnosed neck arthritis or suspected neck arthritis. They might have nuchal bursitis and
very overdeveloped up.
They're very overdeveloped in their splenius capitis and their semispinalis muscles. They're very overdeveloped in their brachiocephalicus muscles, which is the under part of their neck. They're not developed through their top line at all. Yeah, they're not developed through their cervical trapezius muscles at all. And like they just are so uncomfortable. And because the hard thing is about about dressage is that it's supposed to be inviting a horse to use themselves correctly. Like, I think of dressage as Pilates for horses.
Yes,
but
I love that.
You probably wouldn't enjoy Pilates if you were forced to do it with your chin tied to your chest.
And I love how you just said invite. You know, that's a word I use all the time about connection. The horse should be invited into connection. So if you're using something to hold the head in place, that's not an invitation.
Right.
And so that's one of my favorite words to describe proper connection. If it's not an invitation, then it's not correct.
Right.
Right? And so, and it's not that you can't use a tool to help in certain circumstances with the right hands or whatever. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But when you think of contact and a horse that you want the horse to want to be there.
Right.
And so, yes, it's the very, very, very much harder road.
It's so hard.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
But if you like self-torture, like I do,
well, if,
and Maija, and
well,
Allie.
and if you care, I mean, I think what it comes down to is if you actually care to do dressage the way that it's meant to and what the essence of dressage is, which is training. The word dressage in French means to train.
Yes.
And to train and to do dressage, in my opinion, is to fall in love with the process.
Yes, it's all about the journey, right?
It is all about the journey. So why would you take a shortcut and hurt your horse?
Right.
When it's supposed to be about your journey and your partnership.
I think
with
so
them.
many, so many times it's pressures or goals or competitions or, there's so many factors. And I think, and we talked about this in the empathy episode too, but it's okay. Take the time.
Yeah, take the time.
Take the time to show your horse and yourself.
Yeah.
And I tell all my students. I was really hard on one of my favorite students recently. And then he came today and it was totally different. And that was 3 weeks ago. And I was so proud of him. And I just kept praising him because I was pretty tough on him, about the connection a few weeks ago. And then I said, I'm not being, and me being tough is I'm nice about it. But I always make sure to tell people it's nothing that I haven't gone through myself.
Exactly. Yeah, me and you have both used side reins and draw reins.
Right, I've used all of these
things. We're not
things.
proud of it, right? We've been in those shoes of that this is my fourth or fifth horse of the day, or this is a very strong horse and I don't know a better way. But I would implore anyone who's in that position now to look to where their horse is physically and mentally before using a gadget. Because I can basically guarantee that any horse that you're putting a gadget on to fix a problem, they probably have a pretty severe amount of neck pain that's causing them to not want to drop and soften their head and neck.
Right.
Because horses' necks are extremely mobile, and they should naturally be quite soft. And either there's an anxiety that they have that someone like a Melissa could address, or you at home could address with the right help, or there is a physical issue that needs to be addressed. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember that horse that I used draw reins on, who also, got lunged in very tight side reins. His neck was just, it was a brick.
Just
and
locked.
And I think later on his owners figured out he was neurologic or something like that. I think that he just had a really bad neck and probably he just needed help. And he probably.
And which came first?
Yeah. And that's also very possible. I think that's a very good point. I think I do agree with you. I think that a lot of horses with neck issues to begin with, which is incredibly common, just like people, how many of us listening to this right now have had neck pain.
Right.
I have neck pain every day. Well, and it's because there's a bowling ball attached to a very delicate structure. And at least humans have it vertically stacked, right? So that the load is kind of being...
Horses
are out. So a huge amount of support for the neck relies on either the nuchal ligament or the musculature. And when it's forced into a certain position, those structures are damaged very quickly beyond repair, in my opinion. I can almost always, when I'm working on a horse, tell if they've been in a gadget.
I can tell riding them.
Yeah, I'm sure you can.
Most of the time. I mean, I don't...
If it's been used sparingly and maybe by someone
not.
who knows what they're doing, maybe not, because it hasn't had the time to aggravate that issue. I can usually
get on a horse and say, oh, this was trained in draw reins, or this has been in draw reins a lot. Because you can feel it.
Right.
So, I mean, that alone says you can tell as a body professional,
Right.
but I just messed it up.
No, you're good. Body professional.
Body professional. You're the body professional. And then I can feel it as a trainer. It's like, then already that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
About what these devices do to the horse's musculature physically.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole mental side
Yeah.
that goes along with it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to just like zoom out a little bit and just quickly discuss, I think most people listening to this are pretty familiar with what we're talking about, but I just want to like quickly touch on what everything is.
Sure.
So side reins are generally used when lunging, but some people actually do use them under saddle. I've seen that. Oh, you haven't seen that?
I have not seen that. Are you serious?
Oh, I'll tell you who is in our area who uses them.
Oh, geez. Under
It's a lot of people.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, it's because...
While riding? Okay.
For their beginner lessons.
I'm shocked.
For their beginner lessons, because their beginners can't hold the draw reins.
Right. The draw reins? You just went from... Okay, stop.
So they go from the draw rein, they go to the side reins, and they go
and then they go to the draw reins. And then they never learn how to connect a horse. Okay. It's fine. Carry on.
So side reins, so basically, typically, what they're supposed to be used for is on a surcingle when you're lunging a horse. And basically, they're a piece of leather. They may or may not have like a elastic donut or a piece of elastic.
Rubber, yeah.
And it clips from the surcingle, which is fixed on the horse's body, and it clips to the horse's bit. And basically, it helps to fix a horse in a certain position. Now, side reins have a more direct leverage. Almost like they're a little bit more like a snaffle. Like they have like a more direct leverage on a horse's head and neck if they aren't overly tightened. They're supposed to simulate the rider's hands, right? They're supposed to be like more fixed. If they're elastic, they have a little bit of give, and you're supposed to not tighten them too much. They're just supposed to encourage your horse to have a lower head and neck carriage as they lunge, and encourage them to lower their head and neck, put a little bit more weight on their hind end, engage their thoracic cling. That's the idea behind them. The thing is that's very rarely what actually happens. Most people very overly tighten them, even when they don't think that they are.
Right.
I actually have some interesting research on side reins, because I do think that a lot of more skeptical equestrians, and I used to be this way, kind of look at like either you're an experienced equestrian who's been in the world and uses these gadgets, or you're a horse advocate who has no idea what the real horse world is like.
Right.
I mean, I think that there are some people of that opinion. So I wanted to kind of dissect like a little bit less biased information to kind of maybe speak to that for people. So the first piece of research I found, and basically I scrubbed the internet for any research I could find on any gadgets when it comes to riding or lunging that tie horses' heads and necks down. And this is all the research I found that I'm going to present in this episode, which is not a lot. So the first one I found, this is the only positive one. It concluded, I'm going to restart that. So this one is on side reins. This was a very interesting article that basically took a big survey of horse owners and tested their knowledge on side reins and asked them how they use side reins. So it was self-reported. So that within itself, like, it's great that they did this research, but that within itself is a little bit biased, because it's not like they took a big group of horse owners and went and watched them lunge.
Right.
This was like the horse owners filling
Verbalizing.
out an online survey saying what they do and don't do, which I'm assuming is not nearly as honest as it could be.
Right.
But even with that, there was some very interesting things that came out in this study. So this is, and we will link it in the show notes, evaluating horse owner expertise in professional use of auxiliary reins, which is side reins, during horse riding. And it's Heidrun Geltlin et al. And this is a 2021 study.
During riding. Or during lunging.
During lunging. Oh, during horse riding?
It said horse riding. It might be wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So we're assuming that that's a little bit of a
Language barrier.
We're assuming that that's a little bit of language barrier. And so here's basically like the end like results of the study. Side reins are often criticized if they're used incorrectly, which can harm the horse by causing overwork, accidents, and injuries. Most participants of our study felt that they used the reins responsibly. However, to our mind, there is still a need for clarification and a lack of information among the horse owners regarding the pros and cons of using side reins, as well as the effects of the different reins used, because basically they presented the people with a panel of different kinds of like tie downs that we'll discuss all of them in this podcast. Half of the participants did not change their reins during the entire training session. We can discuss a little bit why that's problematic. Some participants adjusted their horse too tightly and did not change anything despite their related breathing problems. My question is how they got people to admit that. That's wild to me. Further research is needed to explore strategies to educate horse owners/trainers, improve their knowledge about riding aids, and by association, improve equine well-being. And this is my favorite part of this. This is a direct quote from the study. Educating horse owners, riders, and trainers by promoting scientific information and research results is essential to promoting equine well-being.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Yay.
We love that. So that was super interesting. Oh, and another quote from this study. Regardless of qualification level, so that means trained or untrained, like trainers or amateurs.
Okay.
Unintentional neglect due to owner or rider ignorance and inflated confidence in their equine-related knowledge, which is the Dunning-Kruger effect, could result in people utilizing equine training aids inappropriately and unintentionally compromising their horse's welfare and performance. The goal must always be to use side reins for only a short time in a problem-oriented way in the training and correction of horses in order to make these reins superfluous. Love that. Mm-hmm. And this knowledge must become an integral part of riding training. So I really love that. I love that scientists sat and basically were like, how can we advocate for the horses in a way that actually uses science, not just basically being like, stop doing it.
Right.
And basically they found, even in a self-reported study that people were restricting their horses to the point that the horses couldn't breathe.
And they were willing to, they're
willing to admit that. That's really crazy to me.
That is crazy.
Yeah, I would love to hear, so this will be linked in the show notes for anyone who wants to read it and kind of dive into the research more.
What's the effect? What was that name?
Dunning-Kruger effect. So basically, the Dunning-Kruger effect is like a bell curve.
Okay.
So on one axis, it's how much you think you know, and the other axis is what you actually know. Yeah, and basically there's a bell curve where like you're at the highest point where you think you know a lot and you don't.
So, but does anyone... wow, because in horses, you should just always feel like you don't know anything.
No, I do think... but I think that they're... what I see, and I'm not trying to criticize, like, any one person here, because it's not like... I don't think it's intentional on anyone's part, but what I see is people who are in the same barn for a very long time, and they think that that's the only thing in the horse world, and they've never been questioned on why they do why they do the things they do. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, using side reins or certain system or draw reins, that might be just very standard in that barn. Mm-hmm. And the riders are like, oh, well, this is standard. And, oh, I've been with this trainer for 5 years and I'm super familiar with their program. Mm-hmm. And like, maybe they're even starting to max out that trainer. And they think that suddenly like, oh, well, I'm like getting close to that trainer's level of knowledge and expertise. Like I must be really well off. Right. But it's actually a lot more likely that that trainer is underqualified.
Right.
Or even... maybe not underqualified, but maybe that's a trainer that is a stepping stone in your riding journey on the way to the next more educated person.
Right.
So, I thought that was interesting because, the part in the study, and I don't know who these scientists are who made this. I don't know what they're basing, kind of like side reins should only be used in a very specific problem issue. Like I agree. I think most people listening to this should just not use side reins because I actually think lunging is a very specific skill, not even long lining, which is
lunging
like
itself.
Very like long lining is a whole nother thing that is extremely hard. Yes. But just lunging is a very specific skill.
To be done correctly, absolutely.
That most people don't have.
Most people, because it has to be balanced and. You have to be driving the parts in the right place and you have to be activating. You have to have the balance there. Like there's so much to simple lunging that people don't
And
focus
body
on.
language.
Oh
Like
my gosh,
I
the
see
body language
people
is huge.
I see people either getting frustrated with their horse for going really slowly because they have totally passive body language and are looking away from their horse and like not focusing, or I see people upset that their horse is behaving badly because they like took their horse out of a field, it's a cold day, they clip the lunge line on the horse and they like shoot
Chase
the horse. They chase it off and the horse goes bucking. They're like, bah, 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 and then they yank it. And I'm like, what did you think was going to happen?
It should be a dance, just like riding.
Exactly. Riding,
It's
lunging.
a communication.
Lunging is basically riding with like way less tools, is how I think of it.
Absolutely. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I want my horses in a plain rope halter with nothing on them, looking like they're in a pre-St. George test.
Okay.
If they're able to, if they're at that level.
Awesome.
But my FEI horses should be round and using themselves.
And
soft and all the muscles and not leaning on the rope.
Right.
Because if they're leaning on the rope, they're not balancing.
Right, exactly.
So it should be like this really lovely
self-carriage,
soft, balanced work. Right. And that takes time. I'm not saying like you're going to pull your... This is actually one of the tells that I do when I get horses that have some training, when I get them in.
Yeah.
The first thing, before I get on any horse, I ground work them. But that's going to tell me a lot about where their self-carriage is. If they can't balance on a lunge circle, they're falling in, the head's going out, the shoulders falling in.
That's indicating
I need to know that
problem to me. I mean,
of course.
That is immediately to me the first thing I think is like if a horse is that bad balance wise and you have done like they've been in some level of exercise, I'm very worried about like a suspensory or something. Like
so I'm going to tell you that's 100% of the horses I get in. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, and I mean I guess that honestly
it takes time to teach them that the balance that they should have to carry that.
Okay.
Right. And I'm not saying that that's like every horse that comes in my barn is poorly trained. That's not what I'm saying at all. But they haven't been taught in that manner on a lunge circle to hold their own balance and carry it.
Right.
What I can say is that a lot of it does transfer into under saddle work as well. Yeah.
No, I do see like sometimes horses coming from trainers who are almost like too good is the wrong word because it's not a positive thing, but like they've helped the horse so much and they've gotten the horse so reliant on them.
Yes.
And first of all, that isn't going to translate well to probably their amateur owner who's a little bit less skilled. And second of all, you're not actually doing the horse any favors by making them so reliant on you and your aids.
Right.
Like you should be able to do your dressage test with like a very soft rein and very little aids. Like it should be light. It should feel easy and
feel light.
And be fun too. Like it shouldn't be work.
Especially if you have to ride 8 a day or something, Like sometimes when I go try a bunch of horses, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was exhausting because I just had to like manhandle all these horses around a ring, and I go, ugh.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good. I want it to feel like just this really nice conversation like we have.
Right.
That's what I want it to feel like when I'm riding, is like these little tweaks, and just little communications of my seat and like a little shift of my weight to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And so, and the other thing is if you're using, because this is the contraption episode, if you're using a lot of those things, you're never going to get that level of communication.
Right, because even, I've said some people have told me the reason why they use a certain aid like that is that the horse balances on them. And I'm like, that's not a good thing.
So you think that's fixing it? They're like, because they're balancing on that thing then.
Instead of you.
Okay, well, that's not fixing the balance, is it? Right.
They do need to balance themselves eventually.
That's too funny.
So I wanted to touch on this article that was just, first of all, to me, very funny to read because it was incredibly sassy. I love it. I love a sassy, snarky moment when it comes to promoting equine welfare. But also, this man, Jean-Luc Corneille, the article is called Reasons Why We Do Not Use Side Reins, and I will link it in the show notes. Everyone listening to this should absolutely go and read the entire article. I wish I could just read it start to finish in this podcast episode, but I just wanted to pull a few different quotes and you and I discuss it. I want to get your thoughts on them. So Melissa has heard this yet. So he starts out with the article, which is why we do not use side reins. And he is a classical dressage rider. Whatever his body angle, a chicken controls balance by maintaining his head and neck perfectly vertical. Hence, stabilizing the horse head and neck with side reins is a chicken theory. The horse instead controls balance moving his head and neck, which, so, from my background as a biomechanics, having biomechanics knowledge, it's so true. Horses, their neck is essentially a pendulum that's attaching their head, which is incredibly heavy, around 45 pounds, to their trunk. And so this neck is this giant pendulum that has to swing and oscillate to absorb the concussion of a huge amount of movement. Mm-hmm. And when you introduce a tie down or any sort of fixed object to that head and neck, that restricts movement and also hurts the very delicate structures of the neck. The next quote, I love the sass. The problem with all of these restrictive systems, side range, draw range, chambon, gauge, etc., is that they theorize a reaction omitting a fundamental fact. A horse does not work a muscle in balance, reflex contraction, or morphological flaw. For those of you who don't know what that means, that could also be translated into conformational flaw, but instead protects it. So basically what he's saying is a horse is not going to sit there and think, oh, my top line is weak, I need to exercise it. They're going to say, oh, my top line is weak, I do not want to do that.
I don't want to exercise it.
And they are just going to fight that fixed thing, like a draw rein, that much harder. So good.
100%. That's a really good quote. I love that.
Next up, it is understandable, this is the sass right here, and it gets even more sassy. It is understandable that marketing strategies theorize effects that may sell their products. It is the rider's duty to differentiate marketing strategy and reality. There are, for instance, 21 pairs of muscles that move the horse head. Hence, there are at least 21 reasons why the horse reaction might not be the one promised by the advertising. The horse can adapt to the restriction of the side reins, bending the neck, twisting the neck, lowering the trunk between the shoulder blades, bending or twisting the thoracic spine, arching the thoracic vertebrae, and so on. Side reins proponents will tell you that this is because the side reins are not properly adjusted. Truly, this is a preposterous form of denial. Such denial was easy to defend when knowledge of the equine physiology was in its infancy. With today's knowledge, a much better analysis of the horse's reaction can be made. Here are the reasons why we do not use side reins. So good.
So good.
So good. Do you want me to keep going? Do you have any thoughts to add?
No, I just want you to keep going.
You have to read the whole article. I mean, I really dove into this guy's website and I was like, it's so fascinating. He also has books on Kindle that I downloaded and I'm going to read as well. One can easily conceive that any system restricting or modifying the normal cycle of the head and neck movements is going to modify limb kinematics and the vertebral column mechanism. The horse's adaptation can be beneficial but also damaging. It is true that some good horses are capable of sustaining suspension cadence around neck and round back while working with side reins, but these horses are the exception and truly do not need side reins. Bob Hope joked one day, a bank is an institution that loans you money if you can prove you don't need it. The same can be said with side reins. If a horse can adapt to the restriction of the side reins and remain functional, the horse does not need side reins.
That's really good and so true.
That really made me think of you in the way that you make your horses so self-collected. I can't, and also I do think that a lot of people listening to this might say, when I lunge my horse, they put their head straight up in the air and run around in a circle, and I would rather attach a loose side rein to encourage them not to do that. But if they're running around with their head straight up in a circle, that is an indication of
you've got work to do.
That, to me, I'm actually leaning more towards that's something that you would need to address, right. Emotional and partnership-wise. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So I've gotten a lot of horses in that, and one was even in Florida earlier this year, and he would just run on the lunge line. Mm-hmm. And I had my long rope and the rope halter, and he would just throw his head straight up in the air and kind of run, and he would almost, oh my gosh, he's going to fall out behind. Whoa, dude. And I just said the other day, I think I have a video of that, not of the really bad day, because I was trying to video it myself, but I think I do have one when I had a camera on me that wasn't really bad, but now we're 7 months? And I also was without him for a month when we came up. And then he got sent up to me, and he's now...
Came up from Wellington.
Oh, from Wellington,
Melissa
sorry.
splits her time in Wellington and Pennsylvania.
And now he's, like, round and through and walk track canters like he's a vaulting horse.
That's awesome.
On the rope halter in 7 months, like 6 months maybe of working on it.
I don't know if this is possible, but can you give me a, like, taste of, like, what you worked on to get there?
Yeah, so I do... we're going to do a course about it, too, because it's so
Please
helpful.
do.
And anybody can learn this. It's not like I've got some magical gift.
No, I've always said, like, I would do a course on lunging because it's so needed, but, like, I don't feel qualified. Like, I don't feel like I'm the person to teach it, but I do think that, like, way more people need to learn how to do it better.
It'd be really fun if you talked about the body while I talked about the how-to. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be cool because I would love to speak to lunging over poles, especially, you know, because I do think, like, I know a lot of people who use certain systems and do, like, lunging for back rehabilitation because there is a lot of benefit to getting the back up without the weight of a rider.
Yes.
But I don't know if all of these systems are actually achieving that. So I would love to explore other options.
Yes, because I love to teach my horses to do cavalettis on the rope halter with nothing else and lifting their back.
Yeah.
There's just like...
I can't imagine a better way to improve their proprioception and core strength. I literally can't imagine a better thing for a horse with back pain.
And it does take a lot of time, and it's not easy. You know, it's not like, oh, this is going to take a week, but it's not supposed to. This is training.
Well, and that's the thing is I think that a lot of people don't want to spend time learning to lunge because it's not fun the way riding is, but it's a very necessary skill.
I'm so glad you just said that. It's not fun. Okay.
That's the thing is I hated lunging. Can I tell you a secret?
Yeah. Secret time.
So I'm Pony Club. Can't believe I'm going to admit this.
I love it.
I have failed my HA, which is the highest level of Pony Club testing. I failed my HA lunging 4 times. Because I was bad at it, and I hated it. I'm sitting here telling everyone you need to learn to lunge.
I love this, though, but, like, how vulnerable and honest and amazing of you.
I failed it 4 times.
That's gorgeous.
And the examiners at that point were like...
We're just like...
They were like, oh, you're just going to keep coming here. And I was like, yeah. No, but what happened is for me to actually... Because I think the thing is so... I was just like, it's freaking lunging. Like, I didn't... You know, my first HA, I was basically not prepared for.
You're like, how hard can it be?
Well, so, you know, the point of the HA is to test if you can run a barn, essentially.
Right.
And at the time I took my first HA, I was running a barn very successfully, and I was like, like...
The lunging is going to be so easy, whatever.
Well, I lunge horses every day.
Every day, it's fine.
And then I got failed. So for those who aren't familiar with Pony Club, they test you on both your horse management skills, and then they also test you on your riding. And the HA is just a test of horse management. And so basically how they test for the lunging is they give you a catch horse.
Right, a horse you don't know.
A horse you don't know. And you essentially have to lunge them to their level of training, which is, I think, kind of bullshit, to be honest with you, because how many horses lunge that well, right? Like, not a lot of them, right? And, like, you're essentially supposed to catch lunge a horse and make them do whatever they know how to do under saddle, which I'm like... There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that the owner or trainer has
properly trained the horse to
lunge. So that is the test. So I didn't fail something easy. Like, it was a hard test. And then walk, trot, canter. So for example, what you typically get is a horse that's like first or second level trained, because you're obviously not putting them over fences. So you have to do, walk, trot, canter, medium trot, medium canter.
You have to do shoulder in?
You have to do leg yields. Okay. I don't think they expect you to do like shoulder in or haunches in or anything. Obedient halts. The first time, the one I failed, I had a very spoiled pony, and she just like had my number and was like,
nope.
And I was just like, and I looked at the examiners and they looked at me and they're like, you're failed. And I was like, that doesn't seem totally fair to me, but fair enough. Like, that's Pony Club, baby.
Right.
And
character building. It's character building.
And they were like, I will never forget this. They were like, all the examiners sat me down. They were like, you're one of the most educated, lovely candidates we've ever met, and we have no doubt you'll do it. You'll pass it.
Not today.
And then I went to the next one, and I I failed it. And then guess what I did? I failed it 2 more times.
And then you passed it.
And then I passed it.
The 5th time was the charm.
The 5th time was the charm. You know what? Maybe it was the 4th time, actually. I think it might have been the 4th time, because the 2nd time I failed it was actually at your barn before I met you.
Oh, you're
Back
kidding.
when I was like 20. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
I lunged a chestnut. I don't know if you remember him at all.
Was he like in my
I think he was yours.
Probably.
Yeah. He was one of yours. He was naughty, but also I didn't know how to lunge.
It wasn't Jag.
I don't think so. I don't know.
Oh my God. Wouldn't that be funny if it was?
Yeah, he was apparently competing like first or second level at the time.
That would have been Jag then. Oh my gosh. How funny would that be?
No, and they failed me so fast when I lunged
Yeah, because
him.
he was terrible at lunch.
Why did you give him to me?
I wasn't part of it. They were just using my facility.
Well, but I got a horse, but you just gave them that horse. What the hell?
She just said, can we use a horse for barn management stuff? And I was like, sure, he's great.
They didn't tell you that you were going to lunge him? Well, no, because that's the thing is he kept fucking taking off, and they kept taking off. This is so funny. I was like,
you like work around him? He's perfect.
You were, just to be clear, you were one of the villains in that story to me, because I was like, I was 20. I was retaking this.
Listen, we still don't know if that's the truth. All right, I don't know. We're speculating.
This test,
like
and they
this
were
story.
no. We were retaking the test, and the examiners were like, no, the trainer said that this is a good horse to lunge, and you need to figure out lunging it. And he like took off. He bucked. And I was just like,
okay, well, if they needed a lunging horse, I would not have given them Jag at that point. So
do you
that
think
could
it's
not
just
have
a
been right.
miscommunication, or do you think it was a different horse? Because it was a big chestnut, or like gelding.
There's no way it was Jag if they asked for a lunging horse.
Okay.
At that time.
Okay.
Now,
Now.
Jag is a great lunging horse, but at the time I wouldn't have done that to anyone.
Okay. Maybe it wasn't Jack.
So I don't
Maybe
know.
It was someone else.
I know, but
yeah,
we'll
I
have to
don't
figure
know.
it out.
Yeah.
Now I'm intrigued.
Anyways, so
Thank you for sharing that really delicate, painful memory of yours.
every time I go to a pony club thing, they're like, we have a bunch of kids and they're going to go do their HA. Like, do you have any advice for them? And I'm like,
Don't do it.
Please. Well, and I'm like, please actually study. And they're like, what? And I was like, I didn't study. I thought I would pass. I was wrong.
I was wrong. And I was managing a barn.
And I was managing a barn, and I thought very highly of myself. I thought it would work out. It did not work out.
4 times.
Okay, I didn't.
Three.
What happened is, I failed entirely. I went and retook, because you can fail a part of the test.
Failing is the best way to learn, just saying.
That is so true. So I failed the entire test, and I wasn't allowed to just retake a part of it. I went back.
The whole thing again?
I had to do, and this is a 3-day test. It sucks. It
Maija.
is really hard. So I failed the entire thing. I decided to retake it. I drove to like North Carolina, I think, all by myself. Little baby Maija.
See, but look at the personal growth that you achieved. How many achievements were unlocked during this horrible experience?
That's true.
A lot.
True. So I drive to North Carolina. I retake it. They fail me on the lunging again. And I did a little bit again.
How was that drive home?
You know what? I was just happy to have the opportunity to retest, honestly.
See, there you go.
I didn't really care. I was like, I will keep showing up for that retest.
And that's one of the things that's amazing about you. You're like, I'm not giving up, so I'll see you guys in...
No, and I was super real with them. Like, I was like, I will be back.
I love that, though. Like, I love that.
And the examiners knew me, and they're like, we know. And they're like,
we'll see you in a
tired of
couple
seeing
months.
you. And so we scheduled the retest at your barn, the lunging, and I failed again. And I was like, this might be the time that I get.
I just give up.
And because it was like cold and rainy, and it was like January or something like that. And it was a while ago. I mean, it was at least, I think it was probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
No, it was like 5 years ago.
I was there.
Yeah, it was about 5 years ago. And also the other thing that really irked me is the other girl who retested with me, who originally failed, passed. And I was just like, and she passed like instantly. Like they watched her like lunge the horse for like maybe 10 minutes, and they just passed her. And they watched me and they watched the horse like take off bucking and be super bad, and they were just like, "You're on your own, kid," and they failed me, and I was just like, "That sucks." And it like, and I knew all of these people, like everyone in Pony Club, and they failed me, and I'm like, "Okay, awesome," and I was like, "This isn't happening again." And so guess what I fucking did for an entire summer is so I found this Pony Club woman because I called around, I harassed everyone. That's what I do best.
I need 1 million horses to lunge.
No, literally, like I just was like, I lunged the crap out of my horse. He was a horrible lunger when I had him. I lunged the crap out of him. He was the best lunging horse, like, for the rest of his life after that. Lunged the crap out of him. Any horse in the barn, anyone would let me lunge, I would lunge. And then I went on, like, a, journey. Like, I went on a quest of finding someone who would, like, teach me to lunge because there wasn't, like, a national examiner. Like, that's the people who test you in Pony Club. So if you can go take lessons from them, that's, like, the way to pass these tests. But I couldn't find one. So I called around. I called everyone. I was like, I need someone to teach me how to do this so I can pass this freaking test. And finally, I find the person, Beth Wickus. She's like 45 minutes away. Yeah, Beth Wickus. Yeah, Miss Wickus is what everyone calls her.
Everyone loves her as a teacher.
Oh, she's very sweet. Yeah, she's great. And so I call her, and I'm like, I need help with this. I need to pass this. I failed it 3 times. I'm going to die if I fail this again, and it's this summer is when I'm retaking it. She's like, okay, come on. Come to me. I have some, lesson ponies that need to be lunged. I drove 45 minutes to her barn at least 3 times a week that entire summer and just lunged horses. She would watch me. She would critique me. I would lunge more horses. I lunged other horses. That entire stupid summer.
I lunged llamas. I lunged.
Is there any question as to why you're so successful? This is your methodology. You're just like, tell me I'm bad and I'm going to follow
and I am going to, yeah.
And then we get to the testing. Okay, this has taken a little bit of a left turn, but I have to finish this story out. So finally, the date is there. The summer is over. The testing is happening. And it is
lucky number 4.
And guess what? It was the original person testing me who originally failed me.
Oh,
Lori Chapman Bosco. And I was just like, and she's really cool. It was not her fault that I failed the first time. I did not know how to lunge. And so she sees me and I see her.
And you're like, dun, dun, dun.
I was like, rematch, baby.
Let's
Dawn
go.
of ages. And guess what they do? They give me a young horse who barely knew how to lunge. And was
at that
really
point, they should have given you they should have given you a steady Eddie, perfect.
No, but I looked Lori in her eye and I was like, I will keep coming back here until you get sick of me. I was like, I got all year, babe.
Even for their own sake, why did they keep giving you difficult horses? I
don't know.
They knew you were going to keep coming back.
So they gave me, and I was like, I know you like to see me.
Right.
I was like, I know you like talking to me, but I was like, I can hang out with you. I can go get coffee. You can just give me the pass.
Let's just be done with this.
So they give me this young mare who wasn't very trained to lunge, and she pulled out tricks in her bag. She pulled out some really good evasions, and I had it handled. It was perfect. I did such a good job with that mare, and they watched me do it. And Lori was like, that mare gave you a really tough run, and you handled it extremely well. Yes. And that was because when you constantly put yourself in hard situations, when it's time and the pressure is on and you're so used to a hard situation, you function under pressure.
That's right.
And they passed me. And she was like, I'm impressed, man. You did the work and you came back.
Love that.
Yeah. But lunging is really hard.
Yes. To do correctly.
And that's so I took a pilgrimage to learn how to lunge. I went on a journey.
I love this.
And I still don't consider myself that good at lunging. I'm going to be real with you. I don't consider myself a very good rider.
I love this.
But for those of you listening who are I know how to lunge. You probably don't.
You probably don't.
I don't know how to lunge that well either. Anyways, but that's the Dunning-Kruger effect too, though. Is
people go oh, how hard can it be?
How hard can it be? Which is honestly my entire life is saying how hard can it be.
And then finding out brutally that it is really hard.
Finding out it's really hard and then having to be well, I said I was going to do it, so...
That was little me. How hard can being an Olympic equestrian be? It's not that hard.
Not that hard.
Okay, fast forward. Whoa. Yeah, it's way harder.
It's that line from whatever show, what? It's hard?
It's hard?
What? Oh, yeah, it's hard. Oh, would.
It's hard?
Okay, so, to get back to...
I'm just glad it was you and not me this time that went on the tangent.
You both do this.
That's great. I know.
It's funny though,
That's why I
right?
said this time. Like, that's why I said this
We're
time.
never gonna stop this. This is good. We're just gonna be here for 8 hours. And it's not,
As usual.
It's gonna be fun the whole time. Like, no complaints.
I'll get
Carry
back
on.
on subject. All right, so there are a lot more really good quotes of this. I'm going to continue reading, and feel free to just like stop me. Due to the more lateral attachment of the proximity of the skull, so this is back to the reasons why we do not use side range Jean-Luc Cornille. I'm reading a quote from him. Due to their more lateral attachment of the proximity of the skull, the splenius muscles are effective for lateral bending. That means they bend the neck and head left to right. 59% of the muscle's fibers are slow oxidative fibers, which implies that postural support is a large part of the splenius's function. So postural support, that would look like basically holding the head and neck up. These two peculiarities explain that quite often horses strongly developed one side of the splenius as an adaptation to the side reins. So that's looking at like an overly developed horse in the upper portion of their neck. And me and Melissa can take pictures of that and point that out on social media so you guys can see that. A horse dealing with a natural imbalance between left and right splenius will likely react to the side reins, aggravating the already existing muscular imbalance. The same protective reflex mechanism can, of course, involve one or both semispinalis capitis, creating torsion of the neck. So I love that from like my perspective. It just really goes to show, and he just outlines it in a really nice way, exactly how like side reins can aggravate a muscular imbalance.
Do you have a dressage whip here?
I might actually in that. I think I have a lunge whip.
I can actually demonstrate it.
Okay.
Using a whip.
Do you want me to grab it?
So if you would like to have a really nice top line in your horse from the wither all the way to the ear. Now, of course, top line goes back to the tail, but this demonstration is just for this part. You would have an arc similar to this, where all the muscles are in proper balance of the neck, right? If it is not, and that can come from improper connection or side reins, you will get an effect that is more like this. So there's a dip in front of the wither, and there's an overdevelopment of the splenius muscle right there.
Yeah.
And so this is just a good visual demonstration for how you, when you're looking at your horse in photos or, and I want to see this when I look at conformational photos of my horses as well, where the muscles are and where, are they soft standing there? Or do we have some of this going on? And you're not going to have soft muscles if you've got this development. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree.
And so this, so it's like, it's cool, right?
Yeah, no, I really like that. That's
that.
a great visual tool.
That is. It's very good.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, and now here is where we get into, because I think so far we've really discussed like all these mechanisms are bad for the horse physically and mentally. But I think what a lot of people might not realize is how bad they are and just like a waste of time they are in a way, training wise. It might feel like, especially side reins are like a shortcut and they make your life easier. But this next quote from Jean-Luc Cornille goes into why actually they're not an effective training aid. At the lunge, one can change the cadence or the size of the circle, but guiding the horse's brain towards the most appropriate body coordination demands a conversation that only riding the horse or working in hand the way we profess at the Science of Motion can achieve. Yes. The horse's first reaction is always protecting his actual body state. If the horse errors are analyzed intelligently, the horse errors informed the rider of the horse's actual body state, and the rider can judge and provide appropriated insights. So, for example, if a horse is hollow to the right and you can feel that under saddle, it's very easy to feel that under saddle. It's very easy to apply the outside aid and to ask them to round through their back again. If at the contrary, the horse's errors are judges in respect of the side reins' theoretical effects, the horse will only figure a compromise, protecting his fundamental muscle and balance morphological flaw, memory, or other issue. There's a superficial way to look at it, and at this level, the side reins can please one. Once the athletic performance is analyzed for what it truly is, an athletic performance, the side reins are not preparing the horse's physique for the effort. So basically what that means to me, like, you know, not only are like a lot of these aids that we're using on the lunge like actually hurting them, it's not addressing the issues that we can much more easily address riding or in hand.
It's not an effective use of your time either with your horse. You know, people think of it, like you said, as a shortcut. It's going to get me to point B, but it's really not.
Yeah, like you hear people say like, oh, well, I'm going to attach the side reins and lunge them so they can fight the side reins.
Right. Yeah, you've heard that. Yeah.
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah. I'd rather them fight that
than me.
But
then they're just sitting there getting stronger because they're fighting it harder.
And they're developing.
An underneck.
Yeah.
And if there's an imbalance, they're aggravating the imbalance.
They're also creating a lot of TMJ issues. And, you know,
the TMJ issues are crazy. If you have a horse that has been very aggressively used in side reins or draw reins or anything that fixes
guaranteed
them,
they have it.
They are most guaranteed they have TMJ pain. So please check out the TMJ Masterclass, shameless plug, in which I teach you how to massage your horse's TMJ.
Even just a lot of competitive horses, even that aren't being used in sort of devices or contraptions extra to the saddle and bridle, they still have TMJ. Tightness.
Tightness, yeah. I think, the masseter muscle, which is the muscle of mastication, which is chewing, that is in the horse's jaw, is the most used muscle because horses are grazers. They chew all day. So then we also ask them to be soft and accepting of the bit when the muscle one of the muscles we're asking in relation to that works all day. And if any little imbalance from dental or a history of something else or even anxiety becomes present, it's extremely hard to overcome that just through riding alone. I think with what you do with anxiety and allowing horses to relax, it definitely can help. But I do think that there's such a physical block in the TMJ
a lot of
for
times.
most horses.
And you know what I do with each horse before the bridle goes on.
You have them stretch.
Also,
which is so cool. We should definitely do a video on you showing that. Yeah, that'd be
and they
really
learn.
awesome.
They learn it from each other. They learn it easily from us, and we know that it feels good to them, and they enjoy doing it. So of course we want to encourage that, and it just makes them that much more relaxed going into their work. And what a better way to start your work day.
Awesome. That'll be a teaser. We'll have to do that. So you all stay tuned. So the last sassy quote from this article that I wanted to throw in because I thought it was so funny. However, one should not throw the side reins away. They work very well as a leash for the dog.
Oh, that's funny. That is great. Oh, I love that line. Perfect.
Which I think is really just true of most of these aids. But so, I think that we've spent a lot of time being really negative against a lot of training aids and side reins. But I would like to discuss truthful negativity. But I want to discuss the things that we actually like to use.
Super.
And I have research on that as well. My favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So gadgets we do buck with.
All right.
Equiband systems.
Yes.
There are similar other systems. So Equiband systems are basically a resistance band that you attach. The Equiband system is cool because, and I haven't used it. I think I've maybe used it once as a disclaimer. But basically what it is they send you a saddle pad, and the saddle pad has giant clips, and the clips attach to other giant clips that are attached to a giant resistance band, essentially. Yep. And then you go to either lunge or ride your horse in it. And essentially the theory is that it's making your horse work a little bit harder in their hind end. But what they're also noticing is that it's getting the horse to lift under themselves and engage their core and strengthening their back a bit. All right. Okay, so the Equiband system.
Yes.
So what I like about the Equiband system from a body worker's perspective is I kind of doubt it's doing any harm.
Yeah.
Basically. And like that's like, you know, my first guide is like do no harm. So even I'm a lot more willing to experiment with modalities and gadgets that are pretty unlikely to do any harm to a horse. And I feel like the Equiband system is relatively safe because, you know, essentially it's attaching a saddle pad and then there's a resistance band. And I kind of think at worst it's probably going to be a little bit too loosely attached, or it's not going to quite work the way it's supposed to. And to me, the Equiband system, I like always wonder with them, like kind of my feeling with them is probably it works on some horses and doesn't work on others, essentially. You know, like if a horse is really sensitive, maybe they will be, from the feeling of it and from the resistance, maybe they will be really encouraged to like reach under themselves, essentially. And some of the resistance pushing out behind, because what I like to think about is like how something would feel on me if I was a horse, which I know you do too.
Yeah.
So the Equiband system, what makes sense in my mind, and I feel like maybe the people who own Equiband could explain it better, but what makes sense in my mind is how it works is basically like, so it's attached, like, you know, if I was a horse, it'd be kind of attached from like the back of my glutes to my back. And so it's encouraging me to reach under myself more, but then it's also a lot harder for me to push back. So then it's strengthening my glutes and my hamstrings,
Right.
Which are both areas that horses already have a huge amount of tension. So it is definitely something that I would use with caution on horses that are already pre-tense. And I mean, for example, I have used it once. I used it on my very sensitive thoroughbred and he like lost his mind, basically.
Yes, be careful.
So just be careful, right? Like I definitely wouldn't use it for the first time.
And just get
riding
on.
and get on. And I have seen people attach it and then like take a not very fit horse for like a trot on the hills.
Very careful with that.
That is a little bit scary to me because that just seems like, oh my God, that's a lot of work. Like I think of Equibands, I would kind of group it in with like pull work, like exercise and use with extreme caution, build up very slowly.
100%.
But there are two different, very interesting articles with different results on Equibands.
I was going to say, I would be interested in hearing this because I don't think there's anything that Equiband does that I don't achieve with training.
Right, and I think that a lot better results could be achieved just with pull work and hill work, personally, because they just have such a more dynamic question for the body to achieve.
They have been helpful with for some of my students that I'm not on those horses or I'm not on them very much is it is a bit of a bridge to help a student that is not able to engage the core of the horse or lower the croup to get help in those areas.
Right.
Which can benefit also me when I am able to do the training rides or when they can afford it or whatever. But
that makes sense because riding is such a feel thing. You know, if you haven't, for example, I remember the first time my horse actually picked his back up, and I was like, have I never ridden a horse through?
What just happened?
And I was like, that felt really good.
And if you don't know.
And if you don't know, you don't know,
you don't
right?
know.
Like, I had no idea my horse was never through until that one moment when I had already competed at 4th level and my horse actually was through for like 30 seconds.
Isn't
and I
that
was
amazing?
like, how did I get here?
How did I get all this way? And I never actually had my horse's back up. That is a huge point, which is a podcast in and of itself.
Oh, yeah. No, it's really hard. I mean, I'd love to have like another podcast with you about the trick training of various disciplines. But so here are the two different studies because you know I love like a cynical moment. You know I am my parents are both scientists and they are very suspicious of like literally anything. And so I am also suspicious of literally anything. And so I love to look at the research. But so this first Equiband system research study basically came back with the results and the conclusion that preliminary results suggest that the Equiband system may aid dynamic stabilization of the vertebral column. And basically it showed that back displacement and range of motion values were significantly greater on the lunge than in a straight line compared to the placebo group, I believe. And greater movement symmetry was consistent with having corrected all horses to be left-sided. So it looked like overall that there was increased range of motion and decreased like excessive torque of the spine.
Interesting.
But to me, from looking at this, like basically synopsis of the research study, it's not like the full study that I found. It looks like the difference was pretty low between the test group and the placebo group.
Because you can convince me that like that stability.
Yeah, like kind of
provides.
Right, because I was picturing myself using it, and I was like, actually, I almost feel like that might feel good and feel stable to my back if I was a horse and I had a huge back that was swinging. So maybe horses that have like, for example, just what's popping into my head right now, and you would have a much better idea than I do, the very hypermobile young dressage horses we're seeing, maybe this is a good option for. But we have another piece of...
the opposing view?
We have another piece of the opposing view. And so this was, so here's the interesting thing about the study I just referenced that basically said it makes it stable. I looked at the source of funding, and the contributing authors are the developers of the Equiband system.
No.
So there is a conflict of interest. Like,
Absolutely.
I mean, there is like the contract.
The main conflict of interest.
So it was so funny because the source of funding, competing interests, like the two main authors developed the Equiband system. The remaining authors have no competing interests. Okay. That's great.
Great. But the two main ones. And it's something I wish I invented, honestly, because I used to do this with polo reps.
Well, yeah, anyone can do it with polo reps.
We used to do it with polos when I was in college.
Or literally just resistance bands. Like resistance bands you buy at a store.
Which back then
didn't exist.
No, not really.
Yeah. No. But I've used polo wraps before.
Yeah.
And it does the same thing. Like it does not do quite the same thing because it's not a giant...
Because it doesn't have that
flexibility, but it does a little bit encourage them to come under, which is great, if you're lunging them and you don't want to use a certain like leverage and pulley system. Okay, so then this next one looks like it has conflict of interest statement. Authors declare this research was conducted in the absence of any commercial or financial relationships, so no conflict of interest. And basically it found the peak activation. So they basically looked at horses and the activation in their back and their multifidus muscle, which is arguably the most important muscle of the back. They looked at with a resistance band, without a resistance band, over poles, and then with both the resistance band and the poles.
Okay.
Which I think is cool.
Yeah.
So basically that... conclusion was that there was no significant difference between using the device or not using the device. It seems like implementing ground poles is the most effective strategy to increase the activation of the multifidus muscle. And it also says caution should be taken when incorporating the use of a resistance band training device, as muscle work and peak activation were significantly reduced in most locations. Further studies should be performed in regards to the training devices to determine its effects on epaxal musculature. So that's interesting. And I'm actually wondering if they're a little bit using it as support. But the hard thing about all of this is, like, for example, we don't know how tight those resistance bands are. We don't know if they were actually testing the Equiband system or if they were just using their own contraption of resistance bands. All the time, like, I always like to give the research the benefit of the doubt on both sides. Like, I do think that's really interesting that it found that pull work was high and above Equiband system. So I think you and I both go back to the fact that pull work is probably going to achieve what you want a lot more easily. But maybe, for example, if your horse has anxiety about pulls, maybe Equibands lend another option. And it doesn't look like it's probably going to do anything bad, even though this study did say it did lower activation, which is very odd.
That is interesting.
I don't know how. Like, I don't know how that would happen or why.
Unless they're using it to, like...
Yeah, like maybe they don't like it, so they're just kind of moving less. Like maybe there was something about the resistance.
Or maybe
bands.
they're pushing against it in some way that.
Yeah, that was like my curiosity with like, were they overextending the gluteal muscles and like pushing against it hard and then hollowing their back? That was my question of that. That's the only way I could think that the Equiband would do damage.
Because like if we use a resistance band, we know what we're doing. We're doing it on purpose. We are going to target certain things. Like it's all cognizant.
Right.
When you put it on a horse, they're not like, oh, I'm getting a really great workout with these resistance bands. So they might be.
And it goes back to what Jean-Luc Cornille said, is that the horse can't think that they need to strengthen a weak structure.
Right.
They're just going to try to
They're just protecting themselves. That's all they do.
And so that what goes back to like adding a stress of the Equiband system, that there's any way for them to like evade in a way that they can't possibly evade pull work because of its nature. Right. Maybe on a especially weak or uncomfortable horse, it actually will do damage. Right. But I don't know. And Equiband is one of those things that the right person who understands them and understands how to use them and understands their horse,
they benefit.
They could be really beneficial, but the wrong person, they could not be beneficial. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting. Have you ever used Equibands?
I have.
And have you? And we talked about
that. Yeah. So I've used it on a few, and I always just caution people, which you already said, be very careful. As a human that does resistance band work, I can tell you how much harder you work. Much harder. So if you're putting them on your horse, be very mindful of that, because not everybody realizes, they're like, oh, how hard could it be? It's just an elastic band. Well, let me tell you, if you do resistance band workouts, but if you don't, you may not know that, and so don't go right into a full workout with your horse. Start at the walk.
Right.
And like you also said, not under saddle.
Right.
You could be asking for something you didn't.
You could die.
Yeah, you could die. It's fine. Choose life.
All right. So I actually wanted to blow through a few more artificial aids that we haven't totally touched on, but I wanted to kind of do it quickly because we have kind of gotten into the weeds a little bit, as I love to do with you, of side reins and the pros and cons of them. So I came up with a little game, and it's called Name That Gadget. And I'm going to read a little slip. I'm going to pull it out of this bowl. It's going to be a little slip of paper. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to describe to you the negative effects that it has.
Ooh.
Or the positive effects that it has, and you have to guess the gadget.
Okay.
Guess that gadget.
Guess that gadget.
And some of them are good, and some of them are bad, and a lot of them we've talked about, but some of them we haven't. Ooh. Okay, this is a naughty one. This is bad. So this attaches something to the horse's bit, and then attaches it to their body and fixes it. And it's most commonly used. It's most commonly used lunging with like a nylon rope.
And stretcher?
Tie down. Which I think is the same thing. Same thing. Yeah, same thing. And so what we don't like about that is how it stresses out the neck more than anything.
Yes. And it the way the horse swings in the shoulder, it's then pulling on each side of the bit as the horse goes, right? Because when the right leg goes back, it pulls on the right side of the bit.
Right.
And when the left leg goes back, it pulls on the left side. So you're literally taking that horse. And then there are other systems that do the same thing, which we will, I'm sure, get to. But the horse has to learn to kind of hang back off of that so that it doesn't get pulled left, right, every stride.
That's so interesting because basically they're being punished for everything you want them to do.
Reaching to the bit. Yeah.
To reach to the bit and to have nice, free shoulders.
Absolutely.
All right, next one. Ooh, this is something that you like. But it's something that's
rare.
But it's something that some people don't like. I think it can be misused in the wrong hands. You use it on the ground a lot, and it doesn't have any negative effects to a horse when used with the right hands.
The rope halter.
It is
my favorite thing.
So why do you like it?
I love it because I can have really good communication with the horse's head and neck, really. And I can, lunging with it, I can put them in the right body position that ultimately my goal is that they are soft on the rope, that there's no pressure, and they're soft in every muscle of their body.
Okay. And do you like it as a tool instead of a chain?
100%. So that's like a whole nother episode, right? Handling, I will not use, I don't have a chain.
Okay.
I don't own a chain.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because a lot of people always use a chain.
Absolutely. And I grew up that way.
Yeah.
So I'm not knocking, you know, that
is a thing.
that's a thing.
Exists.
But now I've just
prefer the
educated
Yeah.
myself.
Okay.
And spent years, because I always had a chain as like a backup for a long time.
Yeah.
Just in case.
You know, in
Just in
certain
case.
situations, maybe it's a safety issue.
Stallions we've had,
Yeah.
they're trained to the chain, and that's and that is what it is, you know.
Right.
And I boldly was like, no, I don't need it, and then almost lost a stallion.
Oh no!
And then I was like, you know what? On second thought, go get me that. Go get me that stallion. But I have gotten to that point in my relationship with the rope halter that I'm like, I don't need anything else, you know, and I love it. But one thing I do like about lunging with the rope halter over, say, a lunge line connected to a bit, is that when a lunge line's connected to a bit, it will always cause some kind of
jostling in the
yes,
neck.
you know, and then that also will create
want.
tension down the inside of the horse's neck and then into the shoulder. And
You're totally right.
so I don't really like to lunge with anything connected
To the bit.
I
like that. But what I have noticed is that a rope halter isn't your standard in your barn. It's not that every horse just like lives in a rope halter. It's something you use as a training tool.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. And that's nice because there's nothing tying the horse or fixing them to anything.
No.
So that gets a clean pass from me as well.
Yay. This is a great game.
Ooh, okay. So this is one that it seems like it's not a naughty one. It's pretty neutral.
Okay.
It seems like it doesn't do anything bad. We don't know if it actually is doing anything very good either. Now we're going to up the ante. So I am going to give you 2 clues.
Oh, jeez.
And you have to guess.
Okay.
First clue, neutral. It's a neutral training aid.
Okay.
Second clue, it is supposed to work on the muscles.
Neutral. Is it for lunging or riding? Am I allowed to ask questions?
It can be used in either. This is, we prefer poles to this.
Oh, okay.
And it is not tying the horse's head and neck down, which I like. And it probably is not doing any damage to a horse.
Excellent. Okay, so that's the Equiband then.
That it is. All right. Do you want to test me 3 times?
Yes, let's do it. Hope I give good clues. What is this? Oh, okay. This one you do buck with.
Running martingale.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well.
So me and Melissa have like slightly different opinions. So I mean, my background is in eventing, and I grew up using a extremely loose running martingale. So loose, I don't actually think it did anything. So I mean, maybe there's the issue, right?
Right, because if it wasn't doing anything,
it wasn't hurting anything.
Right.
So I will say my coach put it on my horse because he literally like inverted his entire head and he took off with me cross country.
Sure.
It was kind of dangerous. And basically having a little bit of contact with that running martingale allowed him, basically made it so that he couldn't totally invert his head and avoid the bit. And I was better able to keep a contact with the bit, which was a very soft snaffle or like a pelham. And basically helped me be safer cross country.
absolutely.
Do you think, because I don't use them anymore, I don't event, I just do dressage, do you
Right.
think that there's a place for them? Why don't you like them?
I think in that context, the way you described it, then yeah.
Okay.
Then it would be okay. But it's one of those things, that's a real slippery slope, real fast.
It is a slippery slope.
And
I
like
mean,
you said, if you're
right.
using it that lightly,
it probably wasn't doing anything.
so if you're going
right.
to use it to be as it's meant and super effective, then it does create, in my opinion, too much leverage.
So do you think also, too, it can potentially be dangerous with horses using it to balance their head and neck
Absolutely.
over the jumps?
They're not using their hind end.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that this is like 100%. I'm a
No,
dressage rider
right.
with eventing background and show jumping,
Right.
and I've used running martingales.
Right.
But knowing what I know now, I would say there's too much balance and tension going on up front that's taking the focus off of what should be going on behind. But it
right,
can be a great
right.
safety.
It could be a safety tool. I do agree with you, though. I mean, really thinking about how they work, it's actually a little bit scary to think about any horse going over a big fence and eventing with any sort of balance, throwing their head and neck off, because
Right.
that's what they use to balance over
balance
a fence.
themselves, yes.
Especially because cross country, it's so easy for the rider to accidentally like knock the reins and hit the horse in the mouth.
Absolutely.
So, I think the program I was in, I kind of think the baseline was that every horse went in a running. So, I mean, maybe this just raises the question of why are you using it? And it might not be for the right
And
reasons.
like, I think, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that advocate for them that would be, sort of attack us right now.
Yeah.
But I think if they take a step back and really look at the why, and if all your horses go in it, why is that necessary? And do you really, have you even thought about it? Because like we talked about earlier, sometimes programs just have tools.
And they don't think about it
And they
because they
don't think
haven't had
about
to
it.
in a while,
Right.
which is, I understand.
And it's not like, I would love to hear,
Yeah, I would the caveat to us talking about this is you and I are dressage riders. We
Right.
both have eventing backgrounds, but we're not 5-star
and I was not
riders.
a professional eventer, right?
No, I was never a professional either. So, I would love to hear from, if you're an eventer, whoever listening to this who disagrees, I would love to get your thoughts on it,
Right. Absolutely.
But okay, so that's kind of like a maybe good, maybe bad, but like we're not being super judgmental about that
exactly.
one, maybe.
Totally. Oh. Okay, so you're going to get this one really. This is we definitely don't buck with.
Draw reins.
No.
Oh, gauge.
Yes. Just rapid fire. Okay.
I'm very competitive, Melissa.
Go.
So gauge, we don't like that. I have never used a gauge. I think I've maybe seen it once in passing. I'm not trying to be like discriminatory here. I've really only ever heard of show jumpers using this one. I'm sure that they're present in other disciplines.
That's pretty fair.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying like, oh, show jumpers bad, but like it's not something
it's common in that discipline,
right? Because my background is eventing and dressage.
Right.
I just don't. I'm not super familiar with the gauge, but from what I've seen, the amount of leverage that it places on a horse's poll should just seems criminal to me as someone who's never been in the position of using it. It just seems like it's asking for a horse to have a huge amount of pain in their poll and
100%.
all through their neck.
Like, I'm willing to talk to eventers about give me the other side of the running martingale with these. Absolutely not. There's just for me, nobody can argue with me that this is that there's any positive that comes from using these, other than you're skipping a lot of steps and you're tying the horse down. Right. And so people will say, well, you can get there so much faster. At what cost?
At what cost? And what my read on the show jumpers is, like, I think a lot of them have these really incredible, powerful horses to get over the big fences, but then they don't have them broke enough to go on the flat properly.
Yes.
So then they use these gauges as a quick fix to basically get the horse's head down and get through like a flat ride, essentially.
Get through. It's the
get
most
through a
important,
flat
right?
ride, right. But, a show jumper who I really love, who's a dear friend of mine, she's like one of the better dressage riders I know. And she does everything in a jump saddle. And, like, I watch her ride and I'm like, oh my God, you're such a good dressage rider.
That's so cool.
And she does incredibly well. And you know what? Her horses stay unreasonably sound.
That's amazing. Because what do we know about balance, right?
Right,
You gotta keep your horse sounder.
She does an incredible job with them.
I had 2 show jumping instructors, and it's funny, they were the 2 that I had right before I ended up in dressage full time. But I didn't want to do it, but they focused a lot on dressage, and I was like, ugh, this is terrible. I think this is so boring.
Right.
Which is really funny that I ended up doing what I do. But they were both. They instilled that in me, that foundation has to be there. And one of them was not the best flat rider, but the effort that she put into teaching the horse's shoulder in and teaching the horse's leg yields, and like, were they perfect? Could you go in a dressage arena and do that? No. But she really had the right idea of having that foundation. And I had no show jumping students for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And now I have a whole barn in New Jersey. and then
That's really
and a bunch in
special.
Florida.
Like, it kind of shows how the times are changing
Yeah.
as we all continue to have these conversations. And, I think a lot of the top show jumpers are getting an edge by doing
BZ
really
Madden
good
has
flat
one
work.
on staff.
Yeah, a dressage rider. That's
yeah.
really cool. That's
And
really
she's
special.
amazing. Yes,
And she's a lovely rider.
and
as
so
well.
my students, I have Tuesdays with my show jumpers in Florida,
Okay.
and it's so great. They're awesome, but they'll come in and they're like, "You're gonna make us walk. I know it." And so it became this joke then every Tuesday, like, "Oh, I've been doing my walking all week," because in their flat rides they'll just come in and they'll pick up the canter or they'll pick up the trot and like off they go, and they don't work in the walk.
Right.
And they saw it as torture, but they didn't have the exercises. Like, they didn't know what to do, basically, in their flat work. I think a lot of my eventers and my show jumpers, they just didn't know, they didn't have a plan.
I think eventers and show jumpers, us dressage riders, can learn from how well they take action. I think what they could learn from us as dressage riders is the theory behind the action that we take.
Right. And then they all, like, grow to actually like that work.
Yeah, because it is fun.
It is fun if you have a plan and
Right.
you have someone, like, showing you how to get those results out of your horse. But I know as myself, as an eventer and a show jumper, it didn't feel good when I rode on the flat because I didn't know what I needed. And I didn't know how to get those results out of my horse. So I just wanted to get it done and, like, go do the jumps. And so I think with my eventers and my show jumpers, because I have that background of, like, I'm able to make it more fun for them and give them these exercises where they feel the results happening as they're riding. And that makes it the draw of dressage, right? It makes you then go, oh, I want to do that again. I want to do that better. I want to go back to that. And so then it actually changes their mindset about the flat work. And I think that's probably the biggest roadblock for eventers and show jumpers is making dressage
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I always say, like, eventers and show jumpers should go to dressage riders for dressage lessons, not each other, because that's the only way that those sports are going to continue to improve in their flat work. Yeah. I mean, some eventers have actually really, really good dressage backgrounds. But, I think I always, like, kind of scratch my head when I see, like, a top eventer taking a flat lesson from another top eventer, because, like, that top eventer, the highest they've ever done dressage, if they haven't done straight dressage,
right, sure,
is
like around third.
And it's like, you can throw a rock and hit a better, like, more educated dressage rider than that in this area. It's not always available.
It's not always the case.
But, you can get such a deeper level of understanding of the flat work if you go to a dressage instructor.
Absolutely.
If you are a jumper.
I think so.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And they don't ask me to jump the things, and then we're good.
We're good.
All right, I got another one. Let's see.
So I'm 2 for 2 right now.
Yes.
Are you feeling intimidated?
No.
I also did make the cards.
Yeah, you know what?
We'll work this game the next time.
This game is totally rigged.
I'm sorry, I should have produced this more. I'm not doing my job.
So, thank you for your honesty, Maija, that this has been the rigged version of
#fake
news. Since this is fake, I'm going to pick.
Okay.
We already talked about something. Well, in hand.
Long lining.
Yeah. Okay, well, at least it gave you thought about it for a second.
So I think that one of maybe the next pilgrimage I want to take is harassing either Richard or Claudio and learning how to long line.
Yes.
We just giving up on that? Okay. And for those of you who don't know, those are 2 people who are very well respected in the dressage community for their ability to long line.
Yeah, certainly in our area and in Florida.
Right. I think it's very fascinating, the people who long line really well, because there is such an art to, like, basically being able to apply those aids without the weight of a rider and encouraging the horse to lift their back in a way that a lot of us don't know how to do. But is there an actual benefit, is my question to you. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Is there an actual benefit to long lining versus doing, like, classical dressage, like, in handwork?
I think for 0.0001% of people that longline there is.
Okay.
I think there are very few people that are that educated that can make it look brilliant.
Okay.
Bo Jen is another one for me.
Okay.
And as you said, I love
Claudio.
I've
Richard.
known Richard forever. I love Richard.
Yeah.
But it's a really difficult art.
And there's a reason why all those men, I mean, I don't know Bo.
Yes.
But the other two, I mean, fill up clinics because there's just no one else who does it, right? And they're in incredibly high demand because I have heard they will occasionally just fix an issue in a way that no one else can, which is very, very cool. And I'm incredibly interested in it. But I do wonder, I see some people do it very casually. And I always have wondered, like, because it's to like Jean-Luc Corneille's point of you essentially do not have very many aids when you do it, how, like, I think you have to weigh the pros and cons of like, okay, I'm essentially taking a lot of my aids away and then trying to get a different result. So unless I know how to do this really, really well, and I have a very specific plan of what's going to happen, I think maybe my hypothesis is that it's not going to have the benefit people think it is.
Me with the, like, I'm so much of a seat rider.
I am too, and it seems like longlining, I just don't know how you wouldn't get handsy with it.
I've seen, like I said, there's a couple of people in the world that I've seen that are that good at it. And I'm sure there's more than that, but that I know
But
personally.
in our world, we've only seen a few people who do it well.
Because I want that self-carriage and that lightness, and I am not experienced enough as a longliner to get that. I will play with it,
right?
But I am certainly not at that level, and I can do it so much more effectively and efficiently on the horse. But I want also, like, anything I use, I want the horse to be supple everywhere. And for me with long lines, I'm still not at that place that I can get that level of flexion and suppleness through the atlas and the neck and the shoulder, rib cage, highlight, right? All of it, where that I am able to do that sort of PT work, physical therapy type work, riding. I've not mastered executing that with long lines, but I know there's a couple of people that can.
Again, it seems like long lining, lunging is a whole new skill set that's incredibly hard, but long lining is like the PhD.
The masters. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like the PhD version of lunging. So it shouldn't be taken lightly.
No, it shouldn't. And people will, unfortunately,
can do a lot of damage.
Well, and do a lot of damage, but not realizing it, thinking that they're adding to their training program.
Right.
Not realizing the difficulty level of doing it correctly is through the roof.
Right. Especially, like, I could imagine it'd be very easy to, like, pull a horse behind a vertical and not even
very much
realize
so.
it.
Or having them very much into the chest because they're too much into the front end because that's what you've got. So really good people will get the hind end engaged and have the hind leg compressed and have everything in the right place and the horse reaching to the bit and have all of the muscles supple. But it's not what you see most.
Right. Okay. Can I do the final one?
Should we do the final one?
Yeah. Do you want me to do it to you?
I already know what it is. Where was it? Was that it?
I'm going to fake it.
Okay.
All right. You have to do...
We're winning this game.
Who's winning?
Everybody.
This makes me feel a little bit like... Never mind. I don't want to
This is my favorite game show ever.
It's a good game show.
So now you have to do the extreme difficulty level, which is one word. And I'm going to say pulley.
Am I allowed to say the name? Because I know what it is. The lunging system.
Now we're playing the most fun game at all.
Which is, let's try not to get
sued.
Let's try not to get sent to cease and desist.
The lunging system. The pulley and leverage lunging system.
So I have research on that pulley and I have research on it, and I don't think you're going to like the research on it, but I want to talk about it.
Make a joke about now it's the audience's turn to have to guess what we're talking about.
Oh my God.
Right?
Now it is the audience's turn to guess what we are talking about.
To guess what we're talking about.
And I am going to link this study in, I'm just going to say the name of the study because we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to talk about the pros and cons of it. So the study, the effect of a Pessoa training aid on temporal, linear, and angular variables of the working trot by V.A. Walker and Sue Dyson et al. So there is not a conflict of interest statement at all. So this is
we
just
don't know.
We don't know, and I don't have access to this study. I believe I just have access to the abstract, but that isn't abnormal.
Okay.
Just to be clear, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something fishy going on. Just Maija only has so much access to free research is basically what that means. So basically, what this said is a lot of people use the Pessoa training as training aid, which is also referred to in the study as PTA, to develop core muscle strength and during rehabilitation following an injury. What I know of this training aid is a lot of people use it, especially on like off days. Like I know a lot of trainers will Pessoa all the horses once a week. And I know a lot of people who use it with their horse has like kissing spine, for example. And so basically the findings, the findings indicated that the PTA may be beneficial for general training and rehabilitation as a method of improving posture, stimulating core muscles activation, and improving overall way of going without increasing the loading of the forelimb and hind limb structures. Further work is warranted to understand the mechanism which induces these changes. I'm just going to look it up and see if I can find a conflict of interest statement really quick. Okay. Conflict of interest statement states that none of the authors has any financial or personal relationship, so it is unbiased. Okay. So in the conclusion, not the abstract, but the more direct conclusion is basically that a properly fitted PTA may be beneficial. And
what's the maybe?
Let's look at the actual results.
That's a little ambiguous.
It is a little bit ambiguous. Okay. So if we want to dig into it a little bit more, the effect of a PTA on electromyographic activity of the longissimus dorsi, which is the big muscle of the back. So no increase in longissimus dorsi activity when horses worked with or without. So basically no difference. It was suggested that deeper back and abdominal activity may be altered. So basically we can't access the full study to actually see what it means, and it does seem pretty ambiguous. So this is saying that it may help. However, somewhere else it basically said that it didn't make any difference on the back. But the greater question that Melissa brought up to me, I basically told her like, oh, there's this horse that I may be rehabbing. I'm just going to throw it in the Pessoa rig because I've heard so many of my friends with kissing spine use it. And you said, no. And why is that?
For the back, I'm not talking about the back. It may help the back. What I don't like is what it does to the mouth.
Okay.
And I know it said in that study that it doesn't affect balance, but in my personal experience, and I may have been using it incorrectly, I was young, but I also know a lot of people that have corroborated that they've also seen horses flip over in it.
Okay. So you've seen, because it's one thing to say like, okay, this could very potentially cause long-term damage to the TMJ and the structures of the neck. But talk to me a little bit, like let's just briefly touch on the horses that flipped over.
Like I said, I haven't used this system since I was my early 20s. Okay. So, but I don't believe it to be that difficult to fit. That's why they market it. It's not, shouldn't take a degree to fit it to a horse. And so, it seemed
something shouldn't be available to the public if it's that hard
hard to fit.
But, it just comes down to the basic physics of it, basically directly connects
the mouth to the
hind leg, and when the hind leg move, it bumps the mouth.
So that's what I really hate about it.
That just seems kind of crazy.
It pulls on the mouth every time the horse moves. So you're punishing the horse.
So it is essentially a tie down.
That's what I think. That's my take on it.
And it was just
you're teaching the horse to just stay completely behind the vertical, or even just off the bit.
Yeah, just totally
so they don't get pulled. So they're holding themselves, which is not
good.
It's not what you want to strengthen anything.
And it's so interesting because I had never thought about that until you
Our
pointed that out to
conversation.
me.
And I felt so
was
bad because I
suddenly
sort of jumped.
oh, you just immediately were like, no. You are not doing
And then I was like, oh, I'm sorry.
no, you can do that. I don't care.
But I felt bad because I was like, my reaction was so like visceral.
Oh yeah. No, but it's super interesting because like as soon as you pointed it out, I was like, oh my God, how did I? Which in my defense, I've never used it before,
right.
So I've never even seen it. I've like seen other people use them, but
I've seen like a picture. You know what, like a picture of it looks like.
Right? But I've never I never sat and thought about like, oh my God, yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people are, maybe not going to love my take on it because I know they're very popular.
Oh, they're extremely popular. But my question would be, how can you, what is your justification? Right? And because, the interesting thing is I have some friends who have used it and their horses' backs have gotten better. But my question is, at what cost to the neck?
Right.
And at what cost to
because if you look at the way they go, you could say, I can see that helping the back.
No, it seems like it does lift their back
now,
a bit.
You can also fix or improve kissing spines with proper dressage training.
Well, and I also wonder a little bit if these horses are just benefiting from one less day of a rider
on their back.
Yeah, and just doing something to exercise.
And they are round.
And they are round, and their back is lifted probably because it's forced to. Otherwise, it hurts a lot.
Exactly.
But I would love to see a study on using Pessoa in after 3 years of consistent use. What does the neck
and
look
the
like?
TMJ or the
if someone took pictures before, during, and after of using it once a week for 3 years, what would that do compared to a control group that just got to lunge without anything tying it down once a week?
Maybe really proper lunging.
Or maybe proper lunging over poles.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that would be really interesting. So that's an interesting one. And I would love to, if anyone is listening to this and disagrees with us, I would love to hear your justification.
And
I'm very
disagrees
open to
with good with a good argument. I want you to bring me
bring me the science, or bring me the physics of it.
Bring me the physics.
Can you explain away the physics of the Pessoa hitting the horse in the mouth every time it moves?
Right.
Because if you can, I'd love to know.
I would love to. Yeah. And without having the horse just back off of it and stay off of it, because that's not correct either.
Tell me if this is a bad idea. Can you solicit case studies from people in their personal use? I've been using this thing for years, and that literally answers your question of, do this for 3 years and show me what happened.
But they may not know. They're not going to know what it does to the neck without.
And that actually, I think that could be a podcast episode within itself. So those of you who didn't hear, Allie, my producer, basically said well, what if we ask people for case studies? But actually, I think that could be a podcast episode in and of itself of basically I think equestrians often use anecdotal evidence to back up something. So for example, I was going to rehab a horse with the Pessoa system because my best friend uses, or someone I care about, uses the Pessoa system on their horse with kissing spine and has seen really good results with it. But that person may have had good results with the back, but maybe that horse's neck hurts a whole lot. And just because one thing has worked for one horse, A, doesn't mean it's going to work for your horse. And B, it doesn't paint a full picture.
Right.
It's all the rider's perceived change. And there is so many elements of placebo effect, suggestibility. If the whole barn is using it, of course more people are going to like it.
And like you said, my friend uses it, so this is going to work for me.
And it's my friend who's obsessed with her horse. Would literally do anything for this horse, right? So it's someone I trust. It's
As
not
most
just
of
a
us would,
person.
and we're not. Most of us are not out to. We're out to help our horses.
Oh yeah,
right. Most of us,
right?
And so you think, this is a really great, until you're
yeah,
maybe it's not.
Yeah,
maybe my mind is blown right now, or maybe my mind will get blown if someone has good.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a trainer out there listening, or a friend of a trainer out there who says, oh, well, this trainer uses this system or a similar system in this specific way, and they get this result. That would be interesting. I would love to hear about it.
I know a lot of people love them and use them repeatedly, but I don't know that everybody knows
the potential negative effects. And I would also just be super interested in none of these things you and I are talking about, I don't have a vested emotional interest in side reins. right? Like I see people use them and I'm like, I don't like that, but I'm not going to like scream and cry.
Yeah,
and, like,
that's not one that I'm like, how dare you?
Yeah, like if I see someone putting their horse around in a gauge, I probably would actually say something, or a tie down. But just like, I don't have an emotional attachment to my belief system when it comes to horses. I have an emotional attachment to advocating for them.
Exactly, for the horse welfare.
For their welfare. Yeah. I don't pick something and choose to hate on it arbitrarily. I sit down and I look at all the research, and actually time and time again, I've had a preconceived notion about something and been proven wrong when I go down a rabbit hole of research.
Right.
Like, for example, I actually totally thought that massage guns were BS, and then I did a ton of research on it, and like the research is super compelling that they actually do something.
They help me a ton.
Oh yeah, and so I actually went out and bought like a nice expensive one. It actually helped me a ton too.
I love
right,
that
and like even red light therapy. Like I went to I went to tell someone, I was like, that doesn't work, and so I went and looked up the research on it, and I was like, oh wow, there is a lot of research that shows that it works.
Red light.
So so if anyone out there is listening to this disagrees with me and has science and has like physiological reasoning as to prove me wrong, I would love to be proved wrong. I would love to believe that a lot of these gadgets that we've used on horses throughout history are not doing the level of damage that it seems like we are to them. So I feel like we've talked a lot about the bad things about side reins, and to me, I do think that there's a lot more bad than good about side reins, but you and I both will occasionally use side reins. We have said all of these negative things about them, but I think side reins are one of those tools that it's just so frequently misused that's why so many people have come out so aggressively against it. But I do think that there's some nuance there. To me personally, like, for example, if you have to lunge and exercise a horse that might not be naturally trained to lower their head and drop their neck. Like if you're in a pinch and you really do need to lunge an anxious horse that is in a phase of their training where they're super inverted all the time, would you consider using side reins with a surcingle that are very loosely adjusted?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there are circumstances that I do use them if there's a time constraint where I can't take, a year to get this horse soft and round and accepting the contact. It can kind of be the bridge to get them steady and understand the general area that you would like them to be. And you can do that in a month. So I won't use them for a long period of time. Yeah. But I will use them in just kind of short little blips to help the horses understand. And I think out of the last 10 horses, I might have used them on 2.
Okay.
Just for like a reference of how frequently I choose to use that as a tool. And if it's my own horse, I'll take forever and I won't use them. But if, like I said, if there's a time constraint or if the horse is really struggling to understand contact and pressure, sometimes I'll use one also.
Oh, interesting.
And I'll start them with one. I don't put 2 on.
So on the outside?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
That's really interesting. Yeah. I like that a lot.
So I'll start there so that I'm not starting out this conversation like your head's tied down.
Right.
It's just hey, what about this pressure over here on the outside? And then I'll use the inside, the lunge line, to help them soften through the top. And then I can kind of use that like I would my hand.
I like that a whole lot. That seems like a nice happy medium of in a pinch or in a situation where you may just have to lunge a horse. Like, for example, let's say you injured yourself and, up till then you did all riding on your horse and they weren't perfectly trained to lunge without side reins yet. Maybe very loosely attached side reins, like very, very loose. Basically to the point where they're not doing anything. But to me, just that little bit of weight from the side reins can encourage the horse to relax their head and neck down from the bit. Just that little bit of weight in the bit, to me, I think does encourage, especially like a younger or more anxious horse that might be more prone to kind of running around with their head up. And they're not going to live in them. Like, I have seen a lot of young horse programs where, they basically have a young horse live in like pretty tightly adjusted side reins for like a few months, or like every single time. Either the horse is ridden and lunged for a while beforehand in side reins, or they're just lunged in side reins. That does seem detrimental to me, but that's not like what you and I are talking about.
I agree. Yeah, I'll use it as a supplement.
Right.
It's not going to be every time they're getting lunged. I'll use the rope halter because I would like to teach them how I want them to go without anything.
Right.
And then I'll supplement those 20% of horses or whatever with and they have to be able to get their head up and away from it. This isn't like a trap.
It's an encouragement.
It's an encouragement.
It's an invitation, right? Because it's not tightened down that much.
No,
like
they can put their head straight up and get away from it.
Right, they can. It's just like that little bit of weight might be the thing that's encouraging them to drop a bit.
So even there, I'm still encouraging them to make the decision, to feel for it, not put them and force them in that position.
Yeah, like I do wonder if that might be a nice way to almost like early on in a horse's training, like have very brief sessions with that, just so that they can kind of loosen and like they can kind of get one sensation at a time. Like they get to play with the bit with a little bit of weight without a rider messing with them.
Exactly, without the rider is a big reason that I'll do it on certain personality types.
Yeah.
And just let them figure it out and work through it mentally for them on their own without having because riders are at that point new to them in general. So for some horses, it's a lot.
Yeah. And like, I do feel like sometimes we just interfere too much with horses. Like sometimes we interfere too little, but I think almost
more than not.
I think more often than not, we interfere too much with them, especially like I even find myself, some of us who are extremely obsessed with our horses. Like I think I like used to just be like, oh my God, like I need to do this, that, and the other, and like micromanage. But sometimes horses just need a minute to kind of process stuff on their own.
Yes. Yeah. That's a big part of emotional health is giving them that space and time to process. If we as humans have to like fix everything and do everything and and we've got to get it. And that time to just let them breathe and think and process is huge. That's where they like learn the most.
Right. Especially, like they have to, I think most of us, but especially horses, can only really learn like one thing at a time. Like giving them a space to process just one or two new things at a time is really beneficial.
Absolutely.
To them.
Keeping it really clear,
Awesome. Yeah, I love that we can have a little bit of a nuanced conversation. I very rarely say that I'm all against one thing or all in on another thing. I do think most of the time there's a gray area in between. I do think with a lot of the gadgets we've talked about, there is just no excuse.
There's no gray area.
Yeah. So maybe not this episode we discuss as much of the gray area, but side reins are one of those things. In the very right hands, there is a time and a place.
Sure.
So I know that we talked about a lot with all of these gadgets, all of the really devastating physical effects of them and why people may or may not why people may be attracted to them, but really the reasons why they shouldn't use them. I was wondering, because you're an equine emotional specialist, can you speak to the emotional tolls that you see like these gadgets having on horses that really, really tie them and force them into a place?
When you start to really read your horses and know their emotions, and you can just start by listening and watching and looking for this stuff, and we'll go into detail about what those exact things are. But what I see is horses that are claustrophobic, horses that have very high anxiety levels, and it's not always outward. It doesn't mean that they're going to explode against these tools that people use. A lot of times they go in more than explode.
Right, because they're prey animals.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to internalize a lot.
They internalize so much, and they really do just, you can just see it. Once you start like really looking at their eyes and studying them, you can see it in their lips and their nostrils and their eyes, and you can see the tension. And so I'll take a lot of time just kind of feeling that out and seeing the physical stress in them, but then knowing what they're really holding on to when I start to move them around in the ways that I'm trying to release that tension. And I can see how long does it take to get them to start to release, how tense are they in their bodies, and how long, and sometimes they've been going like that for a decade or more. So you're talking about taking tension that's basically so built into them at that point and asking them to let go of it. And so I can relate it a lot to, like, people can understand with talking about each other,
right.
in therapy. Or it's kind of the same thing, how long have you been holding on to that stuff? And it's just like us. We go about our day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
But we're holding in a bunch of past, right? And the horses are the same way. So those contraptions can make them feel just like a caged animal, and they're just going along, going through the motions, but internally they have all of this turmoil about it. And when you can see it, it's it's hard for me.
So I have two questions. My first one is, what do you see? Like, because, a lot of us don't see what you see, right? Mm-hmm. I want to know what you see, but also I want to know maybe, and this is, I think, kind of related, like, how does that anxiety and that internal struggle for the horse tend to manifest that you've seen? I mean, and maybe that's too broad, right? We're going to get into that in the next episode with you on equine emotion, but do you have any, like, kind of, like, things that you see the most often there?
I would say, like, for people starting out that want to really delve into this, just start looking at, like, the wrinkles around the nose. Look at the chin. Is the chin pursed or the lips pursed? And look at the eye. The eye will actually change shape. And when it's soft versus when there's a lot of tension in it, or sometimes when it's a little angry. It will, like, go from almond, round, it'll actually change shape as it softens or has tension. So that's really key things to look for. And also, I'll feel the neck muscles. And an easy way to know, too, is, like, is your horse comfortable dropping its head? Or are they stuck up like that? And you ask them to lower it and they come higher, or they really just hold it in that defensive posture.
Yeah.
Then I know I've got some work to do. And a lot of times you can say, well, the horse doesn't know how to do that yet, which is true. They have to work through that. But I will know sort of what level of anxiety we're talking about, or tension, based on just that alone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. So this is reminding me a little bit of that human emotional specialist. I'm forgetting his name right now. But he's done a lot of profiling for the FBI, and he has also gone on to work for the NFL, and he really specializes in micro expressions and being able to, like, read people and tell if they're lying or not. And it really sounds like that's kind of what you're doing for horses. Like, you are looking at these little facial features and you're able to tell what's going on internally with them. Because as much as we all wish they could talk to us, it's really, really hard to tell.
That's the key, is that, starting this path, horsemanship, and then years later crossing over into emotional wellness for horses. That's where it has to start, because you can't just ask them, where is this coming from? Or what happened in your childhood? Or, what happened when you were a foal and a yearling? And so reading all of those facial expressions in little detail, and the musculature and how they're moving and how they're interacting with you, that's where you get all that information to then be able to help them move through it and become more confident and more relaxed and, a better partner.
That's really special, and being able to get that, like, immediate feedback from them just seems like it would be so invaluable to your partnership with them. Being able to kind of see, like, me and Tori just had an episode about thoroughbreds, and we talked a lot about, like, knowing when to push and knowing when to back off. And I think that is one of the hardest things to learn as a trainer, as you go up the levels, especially, and I think that if riders could more implement what you teach, it might help both the success of the relationship, but it might help both the success of, their riding, but it also, I'm sure, would really help to preserve the relationship.
100%. It will also let you know when it's right to push for more, competition-wise and when it's not the right time. You know, reading your horse and knowing where they're at and when they're ready for those things and when you need to take a back seat and let them process longer. And we have so much pressure on us for competitive goals or owners, you know, that want your horse to do X, Y, Z. And one thing I say to my clients all the time is whatever the horse is ready for.
Okay.
So as long as they are comfortable with me letting the horse take the lead on that, then it will work. And it always ends up that the horse is then ready for more because they know that I'm listening to them and I'm wanting them to be ready for it.
Yeah.
And so they're always like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I could do that, you know. but it is a bit of a different path because I'm not just saying, okay, we're going to do this level at this point and then I need you to be doing this then. And, you know, I do have goals, but it's always the horse first.
That's perfect. So basically what I'm hearing that instead of the way that many of us were taught to interact with horses, which is a one-way conversation of telling them what to do and expecting them to be obedient, what I'm hearing is that you have an open dialogue with your horses.
Yes.
So you're able to read their body language and have a conversation with them and ask them and invite them to do things, but be open to their feedback as to what they're ready for.
100%. It is a willing conversation. And it's amazing because it's like you and I sitting here, except there's no verbal.
Yeah.
And it's in real time, you know, and it's like this exchange as you're working with the horse, whether it's on the ground or under saddle, and then we navigate that together. And it's just such when you get that, it's like a drug, you know, there's just
it feels
so
really good.
much partnership that goes on.
Yeah.
And dialogue that is just silent and incredible.
A little magic.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of magical, honestly.
It feels magical, doesn't it?
All right. Well, I can't wait to dive into how to do that with you and your horse in our next episode on equine emotion. I believe the psychologist who did all of that research on human microexpressions, his name was Paul Ekman.
Fascinating work.
Do you have anything else left to add?
We have we
have so much more to talk about. I mean, so, all right, everyone stay tuned for our next episodes with Melissa, which are going to include other aids that we don't buck with, such as bits, different kinds of bits we're going to dive into, as well as different kinds of spurs and whips and other training aids. We may even, we're hoping to have her back and really dissect what she does as an equine emotional specialist and what you can do to help your horse feel their best emotionally.
Yay!
Last question of the podcast.
No, I've been stressing about it.
What is one of the training aids that I just mentioned, not that we've talked about today? Give us a little taste for next time. What is a bit, spur, whip that you don't buck with? And I know there's a lot.
There's a lot. Can I say doubles before you're ready?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, I really like that one. All right.
Great.
I can't wait to talk about it. Thanks for coming
Me
on.
too. Thank you.